All right, Andrew, hit us with the spoiler cast theme song for this week.
Go tell that big skull crawler. Go and tell those Vietnam brawlers. Tell Loki, Fury, and Captain Marvel. Tell him that Kong's gonna cut him down. Tell him that Kong's gonna cut him down.
Nice!
Hey.
That has become easily my favorite part of anything we do is hearing Andrew's theme song every week. Welcome to the Siftpop spoiler cast, where the theme song is different every week because we never want to give anything away. Please make sure and listen to the Siftpop podcast first before you listen to this, because we're not going to be rehashing a lot of the stuff we talked about there. And if you haven't seen Kong Skull Island, we highly recommend you hold off and listen later, not just because we're going to spoil everything about it, but also because we probably won't make sense, because we're going to be jumping around talking about different things that we want to. So hold on to your butts. It's time to do spoilers for Kong Skull Island. I'll just start there and say, we did actually talk about this in the podcast proper. It was brought up. That was one of the only things in the movie that genuinely, like, completely took me out of the movie. I was just like...
He took his line directly from Jurassic
I know,
Park.
like, what is the advantage? Like, I mean, is the advantage there supposed to be that everybody goes, that was in Jurassic Park? Is that all that's supposed to be? Like...
Either that or Sam Jackson has been in so many movies now that he has to start rehashing lines because...
he said every combination of words known to mankind.
He said every single combination of words, yeah. That's the only other logical explanation because let's look on IMDb. I'm curious how many acting credits this guy has now. It's something insane, I know that. So he's been in 173 movies.
Wow.
130 of them were last year, too. Fun fact. So
amazing. So what are some things you guys want to get into and talk about this now that we can spoil it? I'm sure I'll want to talk about some of the specific monster fights. We can talk about how it ends, who dies, who doesn't, any of that kind of stuff. But where do you guys want to start? What's something that stands out to you in the story?
John Goodman and what was his name? Corey Hawkins, who I think he's been in Straight Outta Compton. He was Dr. Dre, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so John Goodman and Corey Hawkins, they're the ones who recruit Tom Hiddleston, and they say he was a former SAS. And this is what I was talking about earlier in the podcast proper. He's been retired forever, but whenever they get to the island after Kong obliterates the helicopters, which, by the way, there were way more helicopters that flew in than were actually on that boat, but that's semantics.
That's hilarious because it has always been a running gag on Siftpop.
Helicopters.
That helicopters are spoilers.
Yeah.
Because, and Barrett, you wouldn't know this, but the original co-host of Siftpop was Danae Hughes. And during one of the early episodes, she was like, "Oh, can we talk about, spoilers now?" We're like, "Sure." And she was like, "There were helicopters in this movie." And I'm like, that's a spoiler? So from then on, anytime anybody mentions spoilers, people mention helicopters. But in this movie, the helicopters could kind of be a spoiler because that scene, there was a lot that went on.
Yeah, and then Kong through the palm tree.
That was insane.
Yeah. That whole sequence right there was beautiful. It was horrifying. It was horrifyingly beautiful because the way they worked with fire, Kong crushing, and then Sam Jackson just he was just standing there staring at him, like he was trying to bulldog Kong, like Kong's gonna be like, "Oh, this guy's serious."
I loved that scene. That was great. But yeah, this is where everybody should have died.
Yeah.
End credits. The end. It's like we came, we saw, we all died.
Here's a question for you. So we know that this King Kong is going to fight Godzilla in 2020. Did this movie, to you, especially to Barrett possibly, did this movie to you guys feel like it was a movie just to set up that fight in a couple years, or did it feel like its own movie?
Oh, that's a good question.
I thought it absolutely was a setup. I mean, the whole thing was an excuse, rightfully so, for a lot of people to show what they can do technologically with this character, to see how big he is, and to introduce him into the universe for further use. And, that's what they were going for, I think.
I think the movie exists to set up that universe, but I also think it does operate on its own terms. I think it is. There is a story. There's enough of a story structure here that you don't feel out of place. I actually, this is going to really rankle some. Probably even Barrett's going to really be rankled by this. But I notoriously one of the reviews on my YouTube channel that gets the most dislikes is for, I can't even remember if it's the Raid or the Raid 2. Because as awesome as the action is in those movies, there isn't even a story to hang that action on. Like it's just from action scene to action scene, from awesomeness to awesomeness.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair.
And so in my review, I took off quite a bit because I need at least some sort of story to hang my hat on. This, I feel like, at least has a story that you can hang your hat on. There's something going on here with what they're trying to do. They're trying to prove that this monster exists, and it's all about hubris and those kind of things. Is it a deep story? Not even close. It is, it's a Thin Mint, but it is, it's something at least. Whereas, a movie like, The Raid or The Raid 2, I can't remember which one, doesn't even really have that. Actually, I think it was Raid 1, because actually I think Raid 2 did have more of a story.
Yeah, he gets sent into the prison.
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that
yeah.
Stuff
Yeah.
It's all
break up
Departed
the whole
style.
guard.
Yeah, exactly. So
we should probably mention that this movie starts off back in the 1940s, whenever John C. Reilly, as a young man, him and a Zero pilot crash land on Skull Island. Which, how did they get through the storm? I'm curious about that.
Who knows?
So
they chased each other through the lightning.
Exactly. So they crash land on this island, and that's whenever we find out that John C. Reilly has been there since World War II. And
it was also interesting because it looked like they were on a beach, like sandy beach. We've never seen sandy beaches at Skull Island.
Yeah.
It's all rocks and threatening things and like, where is that sandy beach on Skull Island? Like, is that on the north side? Like,
That's actually Kong's summer home.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, it's always been like the giant walls to keep people out.
Yeah.
So, interesting. I didn't think of that, but
where is this tropical vacation spot, Skull Island? That sounds amazing.
It's in between the giant spider and the octopus monster.
Okay, it does no longer sounds amazing.
If you get to the saw-blade birds, you've gone too far. So
turn around and go back.
So, yeah. Okay, I'll let you talk about that. There was 4,032 different monsters on this island that were just they were unique.
Did you count?
Yes, exactly, yeah. Even giant ants that sound like birds, apparently. But I did like the character or the creatures' designs, especially the skull crawlers. Mm-hmm. Those things were cool. I thought that they were really well designed and pretty creepy.
Yeah, and that they kept talking about the big one, and that the fight at the end is going to come down to the big skull crawler versus Kong and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can talk about some of those moments. Let's talk about the spider. I alluded to it in the intro with the bamboo. Like, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a bamboo tree, like, impales this guy through the throat. And it's just like, what is going on? And I love in that scene how we really have no clue what's going on, in the same way they have no clue what's going on. And then, they look up and, is that a spider? Is that literally a spider whose legs are camouflaged as bamboo trees? How genius is that? That's so much fun.
Yeah.
They only have one each of these characters, though. Like, if there's a bamboo spider coming after you, there's only one. If there's that one that looks like a log camouflaged, there's only one of them. The only thing that we see more than one of is the skull crawlers. And it's like, it's an obvious thing to just introduce us to something that may or may not be threatening, but that's the only one. You're good. You just keep moving on. It's fine.
That's a fair point. I mean, there were more birds, which makes sense, but no, I think that's a very valid point. And in fact, that would have been interesting. I don't know that they could have done it if it felt like the world was more dense with these monsters. Mm-hmm. And certainly there were a variety of monsters, but it was like they were sparse. They weren't like, they didn't travel in herds.
They should be looking over their shoulders every second of this trip.
Right.
And they go through long stretches of just like they're in the water, they're working on a boat for like 30 minutes. Like the danger is not all is not present all the time. It's just, whenever we need to throw an action scene in there.
Yeah.
Which was often. I really enjoyed the octopus fight. I thought that was really cool.
Nah.
I loved.
It was so pointless. That scene was so
Can I tell you the
pointless.
point? Can I tell you the point of the octopus scene for me?
To show that Kong can eat.
Yeah.
Caviar?
It was about
Calamari?
Kong. Yeah, it was about Kong's sushi eating habits.
Yeah.
It was but literally
Kong like calamari.
literally I had that thought of what does Kong eat to stay this huge, And that's why it's, it makes sense that there are other giant animals on this island, because otherwise he would, waste away to nothing. How many calories a day do you think that dude needs?
I'm glad you got your 8-minute worthless scene to answer that one question. They run into John C. Reilly's character, who is with this tribe of people who are behind this huge wall, bigger than any wall that they've ever done in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And these people there are worshiping King Kong as a protector, as they do in all these other movies. But then they introduce creatures that come from under the ground, and they say that they're skull crawlers, and they're the ones that actually killed Kong's family, and that you need to go through this graveyard in order to get to the northern part of the island to where you can escape. They head through the graveyard. John Goodman gets randomly eaten just out of nowhere. Didn't expect that to happen. And then they have to fight a small skull crawler. Here's a question.
That's kind of the Deep Blue Sea moment of the movie where, Sam Jackson in Deep Blue Sea.
So here's a question I have for you. Maybe you can answer this because I don't really remember. It's been a couple days since I've seen the movie. But they said whenever Kong gets hurt, that's when the big skull crawler is going to come. How does the big skull crawler know when to come out exactly?
I don't know, man. Intuition.
Yeah.
Psychic powers.
It didn't make any sense to me.
He's crawling around in Kong's skull. Like he's in his brain. He knows when.
Must be it.
Yeah.
But then Sam Jackson takes all of his soldiers, and then they wreck with napalm Kong, and then the big skull crawler comes. Get to the end of the movie, it's the final fight between Big Kong and Big Skull Crawler. Great fight scene, by the way. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Rips out that thing's throat.
Did both of you guys feel like the fight scenes at least delivered? Like they were,
That was like
they were
the
cool?
big redeeming part of the movie. Was I could see this Kong fighting Godzilla and holding his own.
Yeah, I mean, what it is just a showcase. I don't know. For me, I see where you're coming from, but for me, like if you don't have any stakes involved with it, it's literally just like watching art happen. A series of wonderful CGI animation with no real attachment whatsoever to it. Kong's going to live. That these things are just puny little annoyances to him. And even though he can survive being burned by napalm, being shot, being all this stuff, and still save the girl too. I don't know. When you have that lack of stakes and the slow motion and all that stuff, it's just like, oh, this is pretty, but I don't really care about it.
I cared about Kong. Like those were the only stakes I had was like, I love this beast and, I wanted him to succeed, which you're right. We know he's going to, although is this the first Kong movie where Kong's alive at the end of the movie? Like, I mean, Kong usually dies at the end of the movie.
It's very true.
Yeah, it's true.
But
he had never previously been slated to fight Godzilla.
Yeah.
That's right. Speaking of that final fight, it does have an homage to, Kong cradling the female, protagonist in his hand, except in this case, while she's in his fist, Kong reaches down the throat of this giant creature and pulls out his spine or heart or stomach or something.
What was that like for her?
Right? It was just a dark roller coaster ride for her. She had no idea what was going on.
I've seen some stuff.
I thought that was spectacular. I was just like, it's such a great way to turn that idea on its head, that tender moment is a moment of violence as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought that was hilarious.
Well, she's Captain Marvel, so it didn't hurt her all that much.
That's true.
So.
That's true.
Yeah.
Here's another thing I wanted to mention. I looked up the name. I wouldn't have known the actress. Her name is Jing Tian.
The Pointless Woman?
Yeah, the Pointless Woman.
Yeah.
Here is what I found out, though, and you will begin to see more and more Asian actors in these movies because of the box office for the Asian countries. I found out, and again, I haven't done a ton of research on this. They are cutting the movie differently in China to feature her character more and his character less.
Huh.
So they're like the same kind of character, but cut differently in different markets based on what should affect the box office.
That is cool, actually.
And that tells you everything that you need to know about this movie. Is we can cut it any which way we can to make the most money in each market. That's hilarious.
Now, I heard that, and I have not done the research, but that makes sense to me as to why she was in the movie in the way she was, because she didn't seem to do anything, but she survived. It wasn't like, she was there to die, so I think, she kind of plays the role, the Corey Hawkins kind of role, and he takes the back seat in the other release. I could be wrong about that.
Because isn't she in The Great Wall, the other pointless Matt Damon movie?
I'm not sure if
I think
she was or not, but yeah. But see, that movie's different because that is a movie made for Chinese audiences,
except they
and
just
then released here. They put Matt Damon in it for us, kind of thing.
So you're saying that Matt Damon isn't in the Asian market?
No.
version?
I think he is. I'm just saying, that's just their type of casting.
Okay.
Now with 100% less, Matt Damon.
Well, they built that wall to keep him out, so you never know.
Wow. Okay.
Anything else you guys wanted to touch on?
Just real quick, post-credit scene. They're sitting in a what would you even call that? An interrogation room. Then they say that Kong's not the only king in the world. They show hieroglyph, like cave paintings of Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah. And then that's setting up the next Godzilla movie, which is Godzilla King of the Monsters.
There was a kid at my showing down the row from me who lost his mind.
We did.
During that post-credit scene. I thought everybody knew that's kind of what was happening, but I mean, he was just like, he was so happy.
Yeah. We know it's happening. We know the movie's going to happen. It's happening next year, but me growing up as a huge kaiju kid, like watching all the Godzillas, the Gamers, the Rodans, all those, it's fan service to a point, but it's also childhood nostalgia, so I just became a kid again whenever all that stuff was happening. Yeah. So I love that part so much.
It's weird, though. Why only those two?
What you mean?
Why only Brie Larson and Tom Hiddleston have been trapped away in this? Why is John C. Reilly able to go hang out with his family and, have a great time, and these others are sequestered?
Why did I get slightly emotional and happy for John C. Reilly reconnecting with this kid? I'm like, good for him. I felt a little happy instead of...
We're more emotional about that hot dog.
Yeah, he loved that hot dog. And he just wanted to watch his Chicago Cubs.
That's an interesting point. What are they going to do with Brie Larson and Tom Hiddleston? Because this is 1973, and Godzilla happens in the present day, right?
Yeah. I was thinking like not Melissa Leo, but I was curious if any of the characters in Godzilla were older versions of Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson, but I checked and they're not. So I guess they're just chilling. I guess they're still in that interrogation room.
I loved hearing the Godzilla roar in IMAX sound. It was man, that was great.
Yep.
I don't know that there's really much else to really talk about. I mean, it's
not a movie you can spoil. It's big monkey fight.
The major twist.
I took my
Kong is actually Kaiser Soze. Spoiler alert.
Kongzer
Soze. Yeah.
Kings or Kongze. Anyways, I took my 12-year-old to see this with me, and he was a little creeped out by some of the stuff.
Like the spider?
The spider, particularly, he mentioned. The birds, he mentioned. I think the scene of them just out of nowhere. That was another out of nowhere death. Just they're sitting there having a conversation, and two birds swoop down and just pick him up by the shoulders. And then they just tear him apart in the air.
But the greatest part happens after that.
They just go
immediately after this guy, he's like, yeah, he's gone. That's it. They just give up. No, well.
They just go back to a "how about them Cowboys" conversation. Like, yeah, he didn't want to come anyway.
I did love when they shot the first bird, and then like all the birds. You realize
it was
that
actually
a
really
whole
beautiful.
tree of birds. Yeah, I thought that shot was pretty cool.
Like I said, there's so many beautiful shots in this movie, but those shots are there just to be beautiful. They don't serve a purpose of any sort.
I also liked, you mentioned the ants. I also kind of liked that they mentioned them but never showed them. Like that it was like, just they didn't feel like it had to go there. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that was cool.
Might as well they showed every other animal on the island, so.
What was that log one?
Oh, the giant walking stick? It was a giant walking log?
Yeah, the walking log. How was that animal going to hurt him?
It didn't. As soon as he started shooting, he's like, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this.
Well, I think we're supposed to believe he was out because he saw the skull crawler behind him.
But that doesn't make sense. If you're camouflaged as the log, why would you become uncamouflaged?
Well, I don't think the skull crawler was I think he became uncamouflaged because he was going to eat Toby Kebbell, and then the skull crawler came upon them, and he was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Toby Kebbell got the better of him at the end, though, because he became King Kong. And
oh, right, yeah.
See what I did there?
I do.
Right.
I thought you were talking about his bloody skull getting vomited up by the skull crusher.
Yeah, that was
the skull
that
crawler.
And his dog tag.
That's right.
That was so
Conveniently,
convenient.
yes.
So many conveniences.
Did you think
in this
he was
movie.
dead? I didn't think he was dead. I
What?
thought he had survived somehow.
Really?
Because they didn't. Anytime they don't show a death.
It's not Game of Thrones. They don't have to have a death on screen for you to confirm that it's a dead person. Plus, it's PG-13, so
I've seen Die Hard. I know you have to see the dead body. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. I can't think of any other big scenes to talk about.
Big dumb fun movie.
It was interesting to see who survived. Oh, I have one more. This movie did this several times, and I really liked it. Where somebody would start to do something like big, and the movie was like, "Listen, your puny little man speeches don't matter to me." Did that with Samuel L. Jackson's death from Kong,
Just crushed him.
just crushed him. And then one of the skull crawlers, when one of the guys was going to sacrifice his life, and
whips him out.
just like, nope.
What? He's like, I'm gonna sacrifice myself for you
Pops
boys.
a couple grenades.
He's like, you go home and you love your mama, and he just gets whips onto the side of a mountain.
Dear Billy, we loved your dad's movie, but it was a little ridiculous. Well, except for Barrett. Dear Billy, Barrett hates your dad's movie.
Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point.
That's right. Thanks, guys. That'll do it for the spoiler cast for this week. We will be back next week to chat Beauty and the Beast spoilers, which, by the way, I think you already know all the Beauty and the Beast spoilers. The Beast spoilers. The Beast spoilers.